why you didn't take your hat off in church. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back. This is my part two to the video I did yesterday on head covering. Uncovering your head, like a lot of people get mad for you. Talking about the Bible or praying or prophesizing with your hat on. And I wanted to just leave y'all with this little story because there was a homeless man who was very poor, and he had a lot of things wrong with him. And he would go to church. A lot of people didn't like him in the church because he didn't smell good. A lot of people hated the way he would talk. A lot of people, they would just look at you, and if you don't look a certain way, people will not really even speak to you. Or they will keep on gossiping about you or saying stuff. But how many people will actually reach out to you? But this man always wore a hat, kind of like this one, because that's all he had. And they would spend so much time coming up to him. The ushers would tap him on the shoulder. Brother, you need to, come on, man, respect God house. You got that hat on every time you come in. We have asked you more than once to take that hat off, And this man was pretty known because he was homeless. Everybody knew him when he would beg for money and everything. But this man, a while back, he saved two little girls from a burning house. And he didn't want nobody to really even know about it. And they never could figure out how those two little girls got out that house. And he really risked his life because the house collapsed. All they could see was the two girls made it out, but they never knew how they really made it out. This man didn't want nobody to know. He didn't want no credit. He was able to escape through the back way, and he took off running before the paramedics and ambulance and fire trucks and anybody got there. So this man had a big heart. But every time he would go to church, he would feel down because so many people always bothered him about that hat. They kept saying, can you please take your hat off in church? And there was a reason why he kept that hat on, but most people just didn't know why. They thought he was just being disrespectful. He didn't know no better. He didn't really care nothing for the Lord. He was just there to be there. And he asked one deacon one time, why do y'all spend so much time worrying about my hat? And the deacon said, because brother is very disrespectful. We don't play that in here. We trying to be patient with you, but you got that hat on, man. Even the kids sitting behind you and in front of you, they turning around looking at you. You starting to cause attention too much in this church, brother. So we're going to ask you again to please remove your hat. And it was probably about 300 people in the church, in the congregation seated, this particular Sunday, that they really just got tired of him wearing his hat. Take your hat off in church, please, once again, brother, as they asked him. And the choir started singing. And the part of the song and the choir song was saying, come as you are. And the old homeless man, he said, oh man, they always talk about come as you are, but when I come as I am, they got a problem with it. He said, my, Christians are something else. Then the lady beside him said, you need to take your hat off while you're in church. Take it off. So the man finally got a little upset. And as he started to take his hat off, people started jumping and getting scared, and one lady even fell out the seat. She fell hard because it shocked her what was on this man's head. This man, top of his head, had a hole in it. And his head was so burnt up pretty much completely. And the little kids got scared and started crying and took off running. They thought they was looking at a horror film because the man's head was a complete mess. While all they could kept saying was take his hat off in church. And when he took his hat off, they see the reason why he kept the hat on. And this man, the homeless man, in his most humblest voice said, the reason I would always keep that hat on because He said, you see 5 rows back behind me, those 2 little girls that y'all always pray about and talk about that made it out that Brandon house. He said, I was the one who went in there 2 stories up and got those babies out of there. And that's why I wore this hat, because I didn't want y'all to see this, nor I didn't want to scare the children. Now look at the children. They scared. He said, so while y'all was so busy talking about take my hat off in church, this was disrespectful to the Most High. He said, don't you know the doctor told me to keep the hat on at all times? As most as I can, so it won't get affected, so nothing won't get off in these sores. He said, but all y'all could talk about was take your hat off in church. Y'all had more focus on my hat than my heart. By this time, the church silent. And that old homeless man said, I wish that more people could focus on the Most High versus the traditions of mankind. Then all of a sudden the homeless man started preaching to them. He said it wasn't never about me really having a hat on. He said, but I also wanted to keep the hat on just to see who's going to be the first to ask me, why do you wear that hat? He said, I've been coming to this church a year and a half, and no one never asked me, why do I have this hat on? Just like no one never asked me, why was I homeless? Nobody never asked me about where is my family. Nobody never asked me, brother, do you need something to eat? Nobody even asked me nothing. He said, y'all spent more time focusing on my hat and y'all little so-called quote-unquote traditions that y'all missed the fact that the Most High sent me to this church for a reason. The Most High sent me through that burning house for a reason. He said nobody knew how those babies made it out. And I didn't even want nobody to know. He said, but I'm frustrated now and I just want the truth to be told on why I did what I did and why I wear this hat. He said, I had a friend of mine that used to come to this church and y'all ran him off. And he said, I want to come for myself just to see why y'all keep running people off. He said, because the way my friend was dressed, y'all closed the door on his face and told him he couldn't come in here looking or smelling like he smelled. He said, and what y'all didn't know, that my friend was not even homeless. My friend has a good job. My friend dressed up just like he was me. And that same friend is the one who takes care of me and reach out to me while the church has never done nothing for me. So he said, I took my hat off, and this will be my last Sunday. He said, because if this is the type of people you're going to be, and it makes me wonder, what kind of God do you serve? He said, but I'm so grateful that I know the Most High for myself. Can you imagine how this church must have felt? Take your hat off in church, brother. You disrespecting God. He said, nobody looked at my heart, but they looked at my hat. Nobody looked at how I was, but they really looked at my hat. So I said all this to say, when it comes down to it, once again, how many people are you turning away from the Most High? Or how many people are you helping come to the Most High? Stop being so concerned about people's outer appearance and start looking at their inner appearance. Because once again, as I close, salvation is a inside job, not an outside job. I love you and have a wonderful, wonderful, blessed day. Take your hat off while you're in this church.